That was a close one. All right, welcome back to the Heroic Industries Heroic Nation podcast. And this is the best show. This is easily the best show we've done. Easily the best show. All right, I say that all the time. I really hate intros. Don't like them. They're awkward. They're always awkward. Anyway, today we talked to Giannetti. Giannetti is an expert in the field of self-defense, martial arts, combatives, specifically knife defense, knife fighting, jiu-jitsu. I consider him an expert. He's better than me. He's higher level than me. So that would be expert to me. But he's all kinds of stuff too. He runs Endeavor Fitness and Defense, I believe. It is located in Columbus, Ohio. He's an old school CrossFitter. That's where I met him way back in the day. So I've known Aaron for a long time. Used to have him to my gym for seminars on self-defense, Krav Maga, jiu-jitsu, all kinds of stuff, right? He's also well-versed in Olympic weightlifting, weightlifting in general, strength and conditioning. He's been around the block, right? Plus, he's a super cool dude. So talk to him at length for over an hour, right? So over an hour. It's like a PR for length of time of Heroic Nation podcast. So there you go. But we covered a lot of stuff about just violence, use of violence, what I consider to be like the language of violence, like communicating with it, because it is a form of communication, right? So we dive into a lot of that stuff, okay? So I think that'll really be a fun conversation for you guys to check out, and I'd love to hear some feedback from you, and let me know what you think about it, okay? All right, so getting some questions, a little plug here, about like, hey, what do we do to get into Heroic Industries? It's really easy. It's really low barrier. This is like the lowest barrier stuff that can possibly be in existence. All you have to do is join School. So School is an online platform for training, right? And Heroic Industries is, we run a lot of our stuff straight out of that group. So it's kind of like a Facebook group, but it operates way smoother and way cooler. Online courses in there, live, basically this, like live podcast, stuff like that, live Zoom calls, live coaching calls, direct access to me and any other of my coaches, nutrition info, all that kind of stuff. So, and it's totally free. So I want this to be a really good, really usable resource and community for, tactical athletes and anyone else that's in the same type of field or dealing with similar work, right? So open to all, but specifically for tactical based population. So there's that, and check out the podcast. Yeah, well, it's totally fine because like my two youngest are out of town with their grandparents, but it usually sounds like a bowling alley's going on upstairs, like just jumping around, flying off of shit and smashing things, and then I upstairs and I'm like, what's going on? Like, we're being quiet. Be like, no, you're not being quiet. Actually, you're being loud.
You're being incredibly loud.
Yeah,
I fucking love it.
apparently we need to work on definitions. What quiet means.
God, how old are your kids?
Dude, the oldest one just turned 16, and let's see, 16, 14, 9, and 5. So
Holy God, blessed Anthony.
yeah, never a dull moment, man. Never a dull moment.
Dude, no kidding. I mean, you've got a wide range of life phases and personalities happening. Holy shit.
Well, yeah, and it's
Can't
funny
even
because
imagine.
like you wonder when you're younger, like you look at kids from the same families and you're like, how did this kid turn out like this? And then the other kid ended up like that. And now it's like, oh, I can totally fucking tell. Because like
100%.
the amount of effort, not that I put in less effort with my younger kids, but I'm just way less concerned. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
it'll be fine. Like,
Yep.
is it broken? Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah,
Like,
you'll live.
right, life's gonna spin on.
I've said that just about our two, because I've got Mavericks 8 and Laney will be 7 in August. And they're only 18 months apart, but they are two completely different kids. And that's always the joke with Kim and I. It was like, what was the first one? It was like, I don't want to kill it. So it's like everything is like, oh my God, oh my God. I was like, he probably just sucked up all that anxiety. And then the second one was just like, we did this before. Like,
Yeah.
that's fine. Like, she busts her face open and she will roll with punches, man. She'll like get laid out, smack her face, be bleeding from the face, and she'll be like, oh, I'm fine. Maverick has like bops his nose and he's like, oh my God. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's some of that for sure that gets like your kid just absorbs it, you know. I remember with
Yeah.
my oldest, taking my oldest home from the hospital, like just terrified in this bucket. Like,
Yeah.
oh God, like I don't want to break this little thing. Like I've held puppies before, but this is not the same thing. What do I do with this guy? So yeah.
It's
And
nuts, man.
and then number four, you just chuck him in the car. You're like, yeah,
I was gonna say,
seat belts. Like, what are seat belts? Like, get in there.
oh, I couldn't even imagine after four. I mean, we stopped at two, and on the second one, I feel like we again not like a less effort type thing, but like half of the worries, if that. I couldn't even imagine four and like just be a. That's actually probably why I'm as like goofy and laid back as I am, because I was the third of three. And at that point in time, my mom was probably just like, fuck it, he'll be fine. Like, let him just lick lead paint off the side.
Well, once you get, I swear, like once you get north of three, it's got to be like a wash where you're like, I got no more effort to put in. Like it
Yep.
is what it is. Like I can't, like if I put in more, try to put in more effort than what I'm doing, like I'm literally gonna die.
Yeah.
So like I can't, I
Yep.
can't. But this is what you
Well,
get.
and then it's just like the third child up then has to take care of that one, right? And I think that's the cycle just going down from then on.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
where
no,
that's where the 16-year-old comes in.
yeah, that's actually like pretty true when you start looking at like huge families, you know, like
Hmm.
way back in the day, like when people had like 10 kids and plus, like some
Oh
of the
yeah.
kids have super crappy relationships with their parents because they never saw them, you know, they were
Yeah.
raised by the older brothers, older sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My aunts and uncles on my grandfather's side, there was 12 of them. And then one of my cousins, who's my mom's age, so she's probably like mid 60s, um, she's got 11. And I mean, it was like she almost popped them out annually, like every fucking 12 months there was a new kid. And it's just like, holy shit. Like, how do you keep, I don't know, that's a whole nother, but it's like, how do you keep up with that many personalities and like, oh my God in heaven.
Yeah, no,
Anyway,
yeah, that's that's not for me.
yeah,
Um,
true that, man.
yeah, yeah. So, dude, how are things going? It's been a minute.
It's been quite a minute, actually. Things are good, man. Things are real good. The gym, we had an interesting, like, yeah, not even COVID anymore. It was like 2 years, like 2000 or 22. So like 2 years ago, it was like the culture had this really weird shift in the gym. Um, and I saw it a little bit too late. Like KCC was taking off and I was traveling a lot. And, I don't know, it was interesting. So honestly, man, I got to say the last year, probably 12 to 14 months out of the 11 that we've been open has been the hardest. And like we finally are making it over that hump. And like now the gym's firing on all cylinders. We got rid of the people we needed to get rid of. We laid better boundaries. We started creating more systems that are in place. It was just shit that I just let slide. And uh, so that was like probably half of my gray hair came from that in the last 14 months. And then KCC's going gangbuster. It's going really well. We've got a couple really big trips coming up. We just got a contract with the U.S. Courts Probation Office in Guam, so we're heading out there early September. I've got a contract with the state of Florida. We had done their Department of Corrections like a year and a half ago. We trained all the training officers for the entire state, and they're bringing us back to work with. I didn't even know that this existed, but the Department of Agriculture and Commerce.
Yeah.
They're pretty much like it's the equivalent of like the Yellowstone cattle cops, but their budget apparently is never ending.
Yeah,
And
I think they have like 1811s and special investigators, the whole nine yards. Yeah, it's like the
dude,
Pope.
it's yeah, it's nuts. So we're heading back down there in September to work with those guys, so that's cool. And then our end user courses are going well, so that's been really good.
Who are you running this training through? Is that through Net Control Concepts or is through something different?
Yeah, I mean it's as far as like transactionally from a business standpoint, it's through my LLC, just like my
Okay.
sole pro. So like I run all of my seminars, personal training, all that kind of shit. I run through Giannetti Enterprises LLC, which is just my individual run LLC. And then we're getting to a point now where I need to establish an LLC for Knife Control Concepts. The question that we're running into, or I'm running into, if I'm being honest, because I do all the administrative work. The question I'm running into is, do I want to create a training company or do I want to create one around KCC? Because if I do it around KCC, it's pigeonholed to knife specifically. Like, so, if Eli, Mike, and I decide to do courses on gun or whatever, we're probably not going to call it KCC. So now the question that I've been kind of noodling over the last month or two has been like, okay, do I want to go through the effort to establish a training company as an LLC that is separate of me and takes us under the umbrella and allows us to expand out? And do I keep that as KCC or something else? But otherwise, I mean, I go to all the courses, I run all the administrative stuff for it, all the marketing, and then um, Mike and or Eli come with me to all the training. So we usually travel in pairs, and we just kind of divvy back and forth who's going where. So as far as the KCC stuff goes, but it's
So,
been really, really good. So
fill me in on because I know a little bit about the KCC and what it is, but
mhm.
like fill me in on more details on it, and
Yeah,
I know I'm assuming you're talking about Eli Knight, but who's
yes.
Mike who?
So Mike Chaney is the black belt that runs my jiu-jitsu program.
Okay.
Well, it's his jiu-jitsu program. He runs his jiu-jitsu program at the gym. But I mean, he runs it. It's his baby. Um,
Did I meet him at the blackout grappling a year ago or so?
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. So Mikey's our head instructor.
Got it.
Um, really good friend of mine. So he's my jiu-jitsu coach. I mean, he's more than that, but from a technical standpoint. Um, and then yeah, Eli Knight. So I started KCC in 2019, uh, and developed it as that online program, and then started teaching seminars on it. But it was all stand up. So then Eli and I partnered and we did a weekend training at the gym. He was doing his bladed grappler stuff. So I did KCC day one and he did bladed grappler day two. And everybody really enjoyed it. But like we started talking and it was like, hey, there might be a better way to approach the ground. The stuff he was teaching at bladed grappler, like you definitely had to have a foundation of a decent foundation of jujitsu to perform a lot of the shit he was doing. And so it was like, how do we create SOPs for everybody from, no background all the way to black belt that actually makes sense for weapons. So that's when Mike, Eli, and I started essentially brainstorming out how do we take what I've done with KCC stand up and apply it to the ground. And so and then I just got to the point was like, guys, like, I mean, I kind of like curated and asked the questions and kind of made sure that I was the idiot proof guy. Like, if they started going off somewhere, I was going like, okay, now remember, like, is this for a jiu-jitsu guy or is this for, Bob who's 30 pounds overweight? And so I played that role, but for the most part, our ground program, they completely created. So I was like, well, why don't you guys just come on and you'll be the ground guys, I'll be the stand-up guys, and we'll travel around together. And it started like we didn't really plan to do too much with it. We were planning on doing like one seminar a year at Endeavor. And then Craig Douglas wanted to host us, so we did that. And then everybody heard Craig Douglas wanted to host us, so they started hosting us. And then we got in with a couple agencies, and it's just really snowballed. And I've really enjoyed it. So the KCC program, it started as I filmed a video forever ago where I was just explaining like I think knife defense, especially in martial arts, is the most just I don't know, man. It's just so played out in choreographs, and it's nothing is ever realistic. It's not built around, in my experience, in most things, it's generally built around like here's this specific attack and here's this specific answer, and it's going to go exactly according to plan. It just and
So
it
it's like
never made sense.
every police academy under the sun.
Yeah, 100%. And
Haymaker. Get
yeah,
it.
and it never made sense to me. And I think it stuck out to me more than anything because that's the risk is 10 times higher. If I fuck up a haymaker defense, well, at least if I have my chin down, maybe I'm not unconscious and I can fight my way out of that. But if I fuck up whatever the fuck I'm trying to do with a blade, it's like that one, all I need is one, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I had filmed a video a while back and I was really just riffing on how I thought knife defense should be taught. And I essentially was like, the hardest part is when you're stuck in the entanglement. So I would spend a ton of time teaching people how to figure out the entanglement. And then if you can figure that out, then you can start stacking all the other skills on top of it because the most fucked up part, you at least have a level of competency at. So there's no fear about, oh, if I fuck this up, I might end up in an entanglement. It's like, well, if I end up in an entanglement, I'm the best trained I could possibly be there. And then we would talk about mid range and dealing with this and blocks and strikes. And then we would talk about, so it was like kind of like building layers out, which is in the self-defense world is an ass backwards way to look at it. Usually it's like, where did the knife come from? How are we addressing the knife? Don't ever get in caught. You know what I mean? Like it was like, and I was kind of the opposite. I was like, well, let's dive into the deep end first. And then that makes swimming in the shallow end a lot more fun, you know?
Yeah.
And
No, and
so,
honestly, dude, that makes sense from like my perspective as a cop. Like if I see you have a knife, I'm never going to engage you. I'm going to shoot you if you don't listen, right? It's like an edge weapon is lethal force, right?
yeah,
So when is that going to happen? It's going to happen when I'm way behind the eight ball and I already am entangled with you. And then
yeah,
it's like, oh shit, he's got a knife that I either didn't see or you brandished like in the middle of the entanglement. Like
yeah,
that's when
100%.
it's going to happen. Otherwise, I'm not going to engage with you. That'd be
Right.
silly.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the thing too. So like, the KCC one, we've kind of built it out into phases, which is exactly, when I originally started riffing on it was the idea. So KCC one, we call it Foundations of Control, and it is all basic primal grappling in with a weapon. And so we define it as introducing all of the common positions and transitions that we see in weapons entanglements and how to move in and out of them, adapting to energy. So it's not an A, B, C, D. It's not, oh, I'm here, so I'm trying to get to here. We look at it as navigating between entry and exit. So I don't know how the knife came into play, and I don't know where I want to go to finish this fight, whether it's running, cuffing, higher force, whatever it is. We stay in the middle. Like you can't leave the entanglement. You have to figure out how to control and neutralize the entanglement to get into this. And here's the common positions that we see happen. So here's how we transition between these positions. Here's the thing that's usually get fucked up. Here's how we start pressuring people. And that's the whole KCC1 thing. So it looks from the outside, from Instagram world, it looks from the outside like, oh, they're just teaching people to wrestle people with knives. And it's like, well, no, we're teaching them, yeah, if you could fucking run away, you'd be a dumbass not to run away. But statistically speaking, if I don't know the knife is present, the guy's already grabbed me by the shirt or fucking around on the ground. Or if I'm carrying a knife, we're fucking around on the ground, he feels my knife and pulls it out. I don't give a shit how the knife got there. You're in an entanglement, whether you like it or not. So, like, you need to learn how to deal with it. So, that's KCC1. And then after KCC1, we go on to KCC2. And that's when we start going, okay, now you're at a distance. You can't run away, but you're at a distance. So now here's blocks and parries. And how do I transition parries into entanglements or parries into striking? And then we start to explore that world. And then, hey, here's shirt grabs, which that's been fascinating to me. We've done a ton of work with grabbing onto clothing, and it's surprising how little people have explored it outside of, again, these like very weird niche like jiu-jitsu shirt chokes. It's like you talk to people about grabbing clothes and they automatically go to like, oh yeah, I saw Henner's shirt choke seminar, and it's like you're not going to hit that shit in 9 times out of 10. But I can tell you right now, I've personally, when I was 12, grabbed a kid's t-shirt, pulled it over his head, and punched him in the face. You know what I mean? It's like, but if you don't practice that stuff, so the
Well,
shirt grab stuff in KCC2,
yeah, even
really
little
like
stuff with shirts,
gangbuster.
man. Like with
Hmm.
with shirts, I mean, if I reach through the camera and grab your shirt, like odds are you're gonna pull away from
Yeah,
that, and it's gonna create like a massive reaction,
yeah,
Even just pulling, so you can't swing your arm naturally as well, like that
yeah.
all. Yeah,
It changes. So it's taking, yeah, drills from gi, jiu-jitsu, and judo, but then applying them to like, oh, what's a t-shirt? It's not a
right.
thick ass, gi that's, double woven. Or, okay, it's a hood it pulls differently. So how do we start to adjust and mess around with that? I actually taught a 2 hour block just on shirts in Florida for the Combative Summit last year. Um, and I mean like a who's who of coaches there. And I was like going into it, I was like, like I'll just try to do something a little bit different, but also practical, So it's not a big deal. I'll work on shirt stuff. And it was afterwards, like you would have thought in a lot of cases, and it was really positive for me. I felt great about it, but like you would have thought no one had ever thought about grabbing shirts. Like it was like, man, that block was like really awesome. I'd never thought about a lot of those things. And I was like, shit, man, I guess I just gotten enough scuffles kind of as a kid. Like that's how we fought.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, we do a lot of that in KCC2, and then we start gearing in towards after KCC2 into like specifics. So like I taught a course in Utah for concealed carry holders that was like applying KCC concepts, drills, and skills to being a concealed carry holder. So if I did want to access my weapon, how am I utilizing these skills to now get to my gun? Obviously, like I said, we worked with the Department of Corrections down in Florida, and so for them, it was like, we're dealing with shivs and anything sharp. How do I control and contain inside of a confined space? Oftentimes, um, until backup gets there. How do I, go from an escort position, into these drills and things like that if something were to go sideways. So we'll specify it, to whatever we're doing there. But yeah, that's essentially like the crux of it. So our flagship course is Foundations of Control, KCC1. That's the one we travel around with the most. It's 2 days, 6 hours each day. It's all stand up day one, all ground day two. And it's nonstop. It's like 6 hours, no breaks. But it's really wrestling. It's more wrestling than anything. But it's solid grappling mechanics specifically to an entanglement. And we stopped counting after a while, but we've had probably like 40 plus jiu-jitsu black belts go through it, over 100 law enforcement officers at this point. It's a pretty big, and every single one of them, we've hit something special because people that are way beyond grappling, knowledge than me, are going like, wow, you've really simplified this down in a very specific context. So it's been very cool, man. We've gotten a ton of positive feedback, and it's still a young course, so it's still evolving. I think that's nice too. But yeah, anyway, I
Yeah,
love
dude,
that course, man. It's a
it's
gangbuster.
it sounds fantastic because any cop that's been on the street for longer than a year has been in
Yeah,
a scuffle where it's like, oh shit, you came across something during the grappling and the striking and the mess that turns into street fights, right? And then after it's done, you're like, holy shit, that dude had a gun or a machete or something. You're like, that could have gone really, really
yeah,
bad or really differently. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So like
100%.
any cop that's been on the street has been through that. And a course like this would help you with your, if nothing else, with your awareness of if and when that starts occurring again.
Yeah,
You're like, oh, I've seen this. I've read this book before, like,
100%.
and then that speeds up reaction time, which speeds up survival or increases survivability for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. So it's been really blessed, man. It's been an awesome program, and like I'm still obsessed with it because every time we leave it, I'm going like, man, is there something I'm missing? Because it's just so terrifying. Like, and you watch enough, like, and I'm watching a ton of knife videos. People are sending me fucking everybody that gets stabbed. I get a video in DMs, and it's like every time I watch it, I'm like, fuck me. That's like, God, I hope I never run into a knife. But it's cool. It keeps us fueled and it keeps us motivated to make sure that we're not, out there just shucking bullshit for money and it's cool. And we jump in and pressure. That's like the best part. Last day, I'll usually like be like, all right, like let's get in there and see if we can not get stabbed ourselves. It's like different body types from like. There's a guy, Joe Ruck out in Connecticut. He was one of the last times him and I drilled together, and it turned into the most just such a dirty fucking fight over the knife. And he's I don't even know what degree black belt. He travels around with the BJJ Globetrotters guys and super awesome dude. Like he's one of my favorite people. But it was like if you watch the video, like there's one point where like when I was the bad guy, he did something probably a little bit too jujitsu-y, and I ended up just fucking cutting, like just slitting his throat, and he was just like, oh god damn. And then we switched, and there was a point where like I went to like just kind of like get past his legs to get over, and he fucking caught me with a butterfly hook and just sent me flying and came up on top like almost in like Saving Private Ryan mode. And it was just, it gets way the fuck out of hand at certain points, but it's cool to get out there and like test that against just different body types and backgrounds, and see, that it works, against dumb, violent energy as well as very high fight IQ.
So when you said he did something too jujitsu-y, like what do you mean by that? What do you mean by
Yeah.
that?
So, like think about the hierarchy. So I usually will tell people like anytime they want to make the argument about what systems are good for self-defense, I flip the equation a different way and I say self-defense isn't a martial art. Self-defense is the lens you view any skill set through. The idea of self-defense at the end of the day is self-preservation, take care of yourself, take care of your family. So it's not a specific subset of rules or skills. It's what's the context of your life? What is your physical ability? What is your psychological ability? What do you need to do? Right. And then what skills do I need to fill those gaps with? Right. So if I look at it through the lens of self-defense, what makes the most sense for self-defense? Well, never being in a fight. So that's your like de-escalation. Don't go stupid place with stupid people to do stupid things, lecture, self-awareness, and all that kind of fun stuff. Okay, cool. We got that. If I do find myself in an altercation, I want to have, as Craig would say, I want to have the verbal skills of a stand-up comedian. Like I want to be able to flex, my words enough to be able to talk somebody down or talk my way out of a situation. So that's its own skill set. If we go kinetic, we get into an actual physical fight, then I would prefer to stay standing, right? So like right out of the gate, respectfully to the world of jujitsu, jujitsu's on the floor. Yes, fights, competition fights start standing, but the whole fucking point is to get them on the ground, right? Well, in most cases for self-defense, if it's solo, I need a skill set that keeps me on my feet whenever possible. If we do go to the ground, I want to be fucking on top. I don't ever want to be comfortable on my back, right? So again, that starts to negate some of the skills from jiu-jitsu. So the way I explain it is really simple. When you get into a fight, I want Greco-Roman wrestling and I would say boxing primarily, but you add kickboxing elements into there. But I need a good striking element and a good Greco-Roman wrestling background to stay standing, control, and to do takedowns on my terms. From there, if we go to the ground, I want to think like a wrestler because the whole point of wrestling is being on top and pressuring them into the ground, and that's where I always want to be. And then jujitsu skills, if I end up on my back, help me to get back on top. Like that's the way that I essentially look at it. So when I say something's too jujitsu-y, in that reference specifically, 9 times out of 10, it's simply in reference to a skill set that would serve somebody very well in a competition jujitsu setting without a weapon. You know what I mean? And that can be anything, you know what I mean? It can be, your deep half plays, it can be your X guards, it can be things that like anybody who's done jujitsu competitions or even just hard rolls with their buddies, there's that thing where like right before you do it, you're like, I got no idea if this is gonna work, but I'm gonna try it anyway. Like one of those type things. And it might work and it might not work. And it's
Yeah.
like that's okay because it's a training setting, it's a training environment, and I'm not gonna die in the process of it. Well, you don't really have that luxury when if I do this thing, I end up getting my throat slit. You know what I mean? So it really cuts the fat and says like out of the 10,000 techniques that I might learn in the world of jujitsu, realistically, there's 20 that actually apply to me in self-defense, right? So that's usually the standard I look at. Now I will counter that and say if I am on my back, the the deeper my understanding of kickboxing, the better I'm going to be at the basics of kickboxing and be able to apply them whenever I need to. The deeper my understanding of wrestling, then the more shit I can pull from when I need to pull from it. The deeper my understanding of jujitsu, then I'm going to be able to improvise a lot better. But SOPs, like standard operating procedure for most of this stuff, I would rather go by like the old Bruce Lee quote, it's like don't fear the guy that's done 10,000 kicks one time, fear the guy that's done one kick 10,000 times. Let's that kind of a mindset, man. Like boil it down to these 10 positions and concepts and then just be an absolute savage drilling those positions and concepts. And that is going to solve 99.9% of self-defense situations. The breadth concept doesn't necessarily apply in most real violent situations because I'm not worried about as again like bringing Craig Douglas up, but the seminar we did with Craig Douglas in Virginia Beach, Eli was explaining this. There was a question about, well, what if they do this, 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 and this? And Eli was explaining in very eloquent Eli terms that, hey, sometimes maybe they're more skilled than you and that happens. And Craig just chimed in and he goes, look, if you happen to end up in a fight over a knife with a Pan Am level purple belt, you're just fucked. And it was kind of one of those like, yeah, I mean, that's realistically, that's what we're looking at. It's like if you end up with the one dude that has spent a decade doing jujitsu and wrestling and then discovered meth and all of a sudden he wants to stab you with a knife, it's like, well, that's a bad day.
Yeah.
And okay, that's your extraneous circumstances, but I'm really trying to prepare for the person that is incredibly violent and aggressive and comfortable with violence and aggression. Like that to me is scarier than the guy that's spent a decade on the mats and is overly talented. Um, because I know that eventually we'll go kind of this direction with the conversation, but violence is a scary skill, and it's something that if you're comfortable with, like that's a whole nother beast. There's a difference between a guy that can put you in an arm bar and a guy that's willing to break your arm because he thinks it's funny. And those are two different fights. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like one
Yes.
guy might use those skills to control you, but there's really no risk for the most part of any injury. And then there's the guy that like he's gonna find it hilarious to hear your bones snap. And like that guy that is a different fight. That's the guy I'm scared of. I'm not worried about the guy that's not as worried, I should say, about the guy that, has spent a decade on the mats and probably has most of his shit worked out, at least to a certain degree. So
Yeah.
I don't
So,
even I don't even know what the question was to start with. I don't know how we got to where we got to,
well,
but
you
there's
know,
your answer.
yeah, no, tons of good points in there. I think let's just take, we talked about this before, but I really want to discuss with you this idea that I can't have come up with it myself. There are way too many smart people in the world, right? But like the way that I view like combatives and like being 16, almost 17 years on in law enforcement, like lang violence is a language, right? So like you present yourself in a scene that's chaotic, it is a violent scene. It's violent in its atmosphere, it's violent in its language, it's violence in the actions. It's all levels of violence. And it everything that you present, right? From just showing up, how you look, how you present yourself, and then the words you say, how you say them. And then if
Yeah.
it does go, like you said, kinetic or physical or whatever, the way that I engage with you, it not just is it's just techniques, but it's me communicating to you like certain things, right?
Yeah.
So like when you start talking about like, well, which system is better and which system should I use? And like, well, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really matter if you're communicating that system effectively. That's the language you're using. You know what I mean? And that's fine. So there is no best necessarily. It's just how you communicate with that system. And it might be like a too deep of a way to look at this, but that's really what it is. You know,
Yeah.
is
I th you,
a form of communication. And as human beings, like we will never not have violence. So you
oh yeah.
better be damn well versed in speaking it at some level, or you're going to be victimized. Like,
Yes.
have to.
Yeah. There's I think you and I years ago talked about this. But there was a section of the book I wrote that said, learn to swim. And it's kind of the same exact concept and idea. It's like violence isn't going anywhere. It's part of our culture. It always has been. And not necessarily even just a culture thing, but just human nature to a certain degree. And there's always a threat of violence. There's always a threat of something going there, and you have to be able to at least read the book a little bit, right? So if violence is there, you have to understand enough about it so that you don't get blindsided by it, right? And in the book, I wrote that article, on learn to swim, and the idea was very simple. Like if you buy, a pool for your house, and you've got a 6-year-old, and you're worried the 6-year-old is going to fall into the pool and drown, the best thing you can do is teach that kid how to swim. It's not telling him to stay away from the pool because the pool's there. There's nothing you can do about it, and shit happens. So they can slip and fall in, all that type shit. So you can't be there every moment in time. So you educate them in that case on how to keep themselves alive. So you give them swimming lessons and teach them respect and all that kind of fun stuff. But you engage them with the fear, you know. Well, it's the same exact thing with violence. Like violence isn't going anywhere; it's everywhere. And yeah, some of us, might make it through our lives and make it to the finish line without, maybe any physical violence, but the threat was there the whole entire time. And if you get shown it and you're worried about it, the best thing to do is learn how to speak it and survive it. And avoiding it is the absolute worst thing that you can possibly do, right? So even like, it's I think the biggest misunderstanding from or the argument from the side of like, oh, that's too violent or not engaging in violence is they think understanding violence means that you are a bad, violent person. And that's not the case. In fact, the more that, at least in my experience, and I would imagine that you would say the same, the more I understand violence and embark into that territory, that actually the nicer and calmer I can be in most cases because to your point, at least, the way that when we originally were discussing this, the way that I viewed it was like the way you're talking about like it's communication, it's like a fluency in a language, like violence is a language. How fluent are you in that language? Well, if I know 5 or 6 words that I learned on Duolingo and I try to go, fucking order something or try to find out where I'm lost in a city that, they only speak that language and I'm asking them like, where's the apple on the table? That doesn't really help me. That's going to make me anxious. I don't have a lot of competency in what's happening around me. There's a lot of what ifs that I can't manage and tolerate because I'm just unfamiliar. If I have a decent conversational fluency, then maybe that brings things down. I can ask the right questions. I can make the right decisions. I can pick up on the right words. I know a little bit more about what they're doing. And then if I'm uber fluent in whatever that language is, then, I can have a full blown conversation and mix and match, right? But to get fluent in something, you got to put in time around it and you've got to put in variables around it. Well, it's the same thing, with violence in those cases. If violence does come up in your life in some form, if you've intentionally avoided it or simply just never been exposed to it, then it's blanketed in fear because it's all unknowns. It's hard to understand, body language or pre-contact cues because, you've avoided understanding what that is. You don't carry yourself the same. So that lack of confidence and competence in that moment like starts to make you fear more. And then that creates anxiety. And then the bad guys, from a victim interview standpoint, they're feeding off of that now. And so now all of a sudden that language of violence becomes harder. And again, you just don't have anything to pick up on.
Well,
So,
and not only that, but on the back end of that, like your ability to handle life after that
oh
process
yeah,
incredibly impacted by your level of awareness before it. And
100%.
like because you have to be able to connect with that other side of yourself, like you said, you phrased it perfectly. Like the more that you get fluent with the language of violence, the nicer of a person you are, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely true because like
Can be. Because there's some bad motherfuckers that are very fluent and violent that are violent to be
well,
violent. But it's
yeah.
the choice to learn violence versus the choice to use violence. But yes.
Yeah, your need to use that violence inappropriately is way,
Yeah.
way, way lower. Now that's
Yeah.
excluding and assuming that you're not an absolute psychopath, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like that's all things assuming, right? But yeah, man, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And then from a competency standpoint, you're
Mhm.
like from a law enforcement side, the more fluent you are, the less likely you are to need to escalate things most of
Yeah.
the not to say all the time, right? Because sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Yeah.
But like if I can grab a key lock and rip you out of a car, then I don't need to punch you in the face 67 times to get you out of the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm
I know
I'm
exactly
more
what video you're talking
I'm
about.
well, pick one,
Oh yeah,
like
numerous. Yeah.
like but yeah, so like I don't need to do that because I'm more
Yeah.
fluent in that aspect of violence.
Yeah. I
And
talk about one of the like balances I talk about a lot of times is like, time and experience versus violence. Like how you have to be violent and be aggressive. And if you don't know anything, you have lower skills, you have lower awareness of what's going on, you have lower ability to feel energy and adapt to energy, lower ability to even just regulate your fucking breathing. You know what I mean? Like to keep your CNS neutral, keep yourself a little more parasympathetic so that you're not making rash decisions. If I don't have the skill, experience, and time going into that, and I'm going to survive any type of violent encounter, I always have to one up the violence, right? I generally have to speak in aggression. That's the technical explanation of the spazzy white belt in jiu-jitsu. It's like, well, if I'm in a position that I'm uncomfortable with and I start to panic because I don't know a way out of this position, my way out of it becomes and like hulking my way out because I don't have a technical, competent answer to whatever the equation is. So if you're less skilled, you have to choose violence and aggression to win. The more time I spend training, the more competent I become, the higher my level of skill, the more I get to choose how much aggression and violence I put into any endeavor in any place, shape, form, right? And so that's one of those arguments going back to law enforcement. And again, I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm a civilian, always have been. I've had the pleasure of training a ton of law enforcement. However, it's hard for people to look on and see whatever, let's say an excessive use of force or, aggressively without going to a weapon and look at that and realize that that's more of a lack of physical training where they see it as, oh, well, these cops are just violent. That's like, no, 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 no. Like that is a panicked, fucked up situation where they're legitimately having to fight. And unfortunately, because we're not giving them more physical training, essentially, in their view, immersing them deeper into violence from a physical standpoint, they don't have the answers that they need. And it's hard to explain that to people that have never fought before, or never been on the mats or taken a punch, to explain to them that the way to become a more competent, calm individual that can control another human physically without injuring them or themselves is by spending more time learning how to control and fight that guy. And so that's one of the big, like I really try to kind of drive that idea home with people is the less skill and experience you have in anything with violence and fighting, the more if you're going to survive a situation or take your own.
All right.
Woo!
I swear to God, I paid for the high dollar Zoom. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to check on it. So
Yeah, that's I had the same exact thing happen. We started one of the KCC things and I was like, what the fuck? What's this timer? And it just it just kicked me off. I was like, oh, sorry about that, guys.
well, I thought
But
it would. I saw it counting down, and it was like danger, danger. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let it go. I think that it'll keep going. Boom, gone. Right? It's like
it's all good, man.
the internet
All
out.
good. Fucking Zoom, man. They got to get their dollars, especially after 2020.
Yeah, no kidding.
Shoot.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so violence and skill. Train more, and you don't need to be nearly as violent.
Well,
Maybe potentially.
and like really from like my belief in it is like, listen, if I tell you get out of the car and you want to fight about it right there, you want to fight me about getting out of a car, like I'm going to use the maximum amount of
Yeah.
allowable force, right? Or violence, however you want to phrase it. But here's the kicker is like the more competent I am, like I'll still use the maximum amount of
Hmm.
force and violence, but the odds of you getting hurt is way lower. You know what I mean? Because I don't need to use
100%.
I don't need
Yeah.
to use it the same way. The way that I apply that force is like the way that I
Yeah.
communicate that force. The way it's different. It's much better or much more effective.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because you spent, at that point in time, God only knows how many hours practicing that. Yeah, it just comes down to training and practice at the end of the day. And if you do something ugly, it's going to end up you're more likely to get somebody hurt. You very rarely, unless it's intentional, you very rarely hear about high level wrestlers and black belts injuring, untrained individuals. You hear it the other way around, which is like, oh, that one guy fell a weird way or freaked out when this happened. And, I got punched in the nose or got bopped that way. Now you're going to have some ego guys that are it's just ego. They're choosing, but they're still choosing to break your shit, versus just spazzing and freaking out about it. And you have to immerse yourself in it. So it's 100%. The more time you spend doing it, that's just where you're going to get at. And you become, that's the other thing too. I mean, even think, and I know we've been speaking a lot about grappling and stuff like that. It's an incredible skill set and it's super important one, especially for law enforcement. Um, but if you've spent enough time underneath some big dude just smashing you, you've learned. how to feel panic and breathe through panic and figure out a solution to get out of it. And that in and of its own right is a skill set. Like, how often are you voluntarily walking into a stressful situation and paying attention to how to mitigate your internal response to that, not just your physical outlet, but the psychological, physiological side of it, and then that's your meditation practices, your ice baths, all that type stuff too. But if you've never, or if you avoid stress, I should say, it's hard for no one, like for us to never have stress, but if you avoid stress like the plague or you run away from it, then when you have no choice but to face it, it's overwhelming. But if you're voluntarily walking into a situation where it's like, I mean, I'm on the mats a minimum, like this was a pretty, slow training week for me, just with schedule. And then I'm competing tomorrow in New Jersey, but even then, in that case, like I was still on the mats at least 3 hours, this week. And so like if I'm putting in even 2 to 3 hours every week, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well that 5 minute, less than 5 minute scuffle I have with this guy on the street or the situation where I'd fed myself, like that's one out of 10,000 rounds that I've done in my life to that point. And it's like you can't argue experience and competence. I mean, you can, but not logistically and not statistically. Like you can't argue that a higher level of experience and exposure to something doesn't output a higher performance level. It's just,
Well,
it's
when you
it's fascinating. And if you're going to be, oh, go
no,
ahead.
yeah, no, when you're talking about like exposure to stress and stuff like that, like you're not only building skill set, right, and time, right, and punching the clock and doing the reps and working the muscle memory and all that kind of stuff, but you're also taking that stress and choosing, like you said, choosing to walk that path and
Mhm.
choosing to go into that stress. So, and just the whole concept of you choosing willingly that I'm going to go do this. I am choosing,
Mhm.
right? Puts me in control so that when that stress happens elsewhere, like you've already chosen to put yourself there. So therefore, like the fact that you're viewing that stress in a positive light or a more positive light means that the outcome is more likely to happen in your direction. And the back end of that, the trauma, the shit that comes with all of that, like say you get into some shit on the street, like no fight, I don't care who you are, whether you're a cop, whether you're just a self-defense or whether whatever, like you get into a street fight, like a no shit street fight, that leaves scars on your
Oh yeah.
psyche, your soul, on everything. Like it fucks you up a little bit, right? And the
Yeah.
worse it is, the bigger it is, the more it fucks you up. So if you're choosing to walk that path and put yourself in those stressful positions, then that changes the way that you view the entire incident more than
Yeah.
likely, right?
100%.
So that's
100%.
that's huge too from a psychological standpoint.
Well, and that's like a before and after. I mean, the whole basis of a lot of, at least, the good, um, you know, dealing with trauma and all that type of stuff is finding good, healthy ways to actually face whatever that thing or that triggering moment was. It's not burying it. Like you find me one professional that deals with any victim, or any situation pushback that tells them that, like, oh yeah, we tell them to just bury that shit as deep as they can and avoid it and just look at the clouds. It's like that's not how it works.
Yeah.
It's like you have to face it. So if you're, to your point, if you're in the practice of facing and accepting those things before they happen, then you're in a much better position to accept, like, okay, I've already accepted that this is something that could happen to me. And then it did. So I'm not that surprised by it, but
Right.
it's still going to leave a mark. But it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. It's like the comment, like, oh, that'll never happen to me type stuff. It's like that's the worst mentality you can have. Like, I hope it never happens to me.
Yeah.
And it can.
The actual thing that it does to your psyche is it totally shatters your worldview. So it
Mhm.
takes this like naive view of like the world is perfect and this will never happen, and like, and all of a sudden you get jacked at gunpoint for your shoes, and it destroys you,
Yep.
completely. You're like, I had no idea. So there's a balance between like this innocence and naive versus the experience and the jadedness. Like there's a balance of it, but if
Yeah.
if you get too far on one side and you always like run around like a 5-year-old and all of a
Oh
sudden
yeah.
something shitty happens to you, like it literally shatters your worldview. And that's
Yeah.
hard for people to come back from.
Oh, 100%. And it's, again, like the more you can expose yourself and get and just acceptance, the higher your chances of coming out the other end. And I mean, that's not, again, negation acknowledged, but that's not us just talking back and forth. I mean, there's enough scientific evidence behind the exposure and all that type of stuff, to go light years. I mean, you could literally bury yourself in the research on it. But to your point again, and it's super important to keep in mind, nobody leaves a violent encounter unchanged. It's something is going to change. The degree and how it impacts you is going to be different person to person based off the situation and your background. But nobody leaves a situation like that completely unchanged. It's just that's not the way life works. So you're increasing your ability to come out the other end in the best version of yourself by at least one, accepting that things like this can happen to you, and then two, putting yourself in a meaningful way, putting yourself and exposing yourself to it in whatever doses are necessary for your context. But if you're a law enforcement officer, I mean, outside of maybe a small ski town somewhere where there's not a lot going on. But if you're, I mean, a major city, and it's not like the statistics aren't out there. Like, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say this. I don't know this from experience, but I feel like you should have an idea what you're getting into based off where you're at. Like, I'm not even a law enforcement officer, but I know if I'm at Columbus Police and you tell me that I'm assigned to patrol over in the hilltop, I'm not in for a good time. Like, I'm going to be seeing a lot of action and some shit's going to be going on. So it's like, you have to understand, well, if that's the choice you've made and that's the situation that's been dictated to you by the career you've chosen, you are definitely not going to avoid violence. So prepare yourself for it, accordingly. But even, so that's in my opinion, would require a higher level of that exposure in a smarter, more meaningful manner. An everyday person, if you're getting one or two good sessions in a week, where you're exposing yourself to something uncomfortable that involves some type of physical contact. Maybe it's wrestling, maybe it's jujitsu, maybe it's boxing, kickboxing, maybe it's a self-defense program, and you're at least in acceptance and playing with some mindsetting drills. Okay, like you're doing better than 99% of the population at that case. And then the more time you can put into it, the better. I don't ever expect anybody to, do what I do. It's like this is my life, 7 days a week, at least 10 hours a day. I'm thinking about something involving violence. Um, which is so funny because the more I think about and accept that just shit can happen at any moment, for me, my wife thinks I'm a little crazy, but for me, I'm just like Zen. I'm just like, all right, well, could die tomorrow. It's like one of those things like I don't leave the house without kissing my wife, telling her I love her, kissing my kids, even if I'm the most pissed off I've ever been, because it's like literally whether it's a car accident or I'm at the gym at 4:30 in the morning and some fucking guy ends up busting in, walking through the back garage door, and he's got a gun or whatever that is, and there's nobody around to help, whatever that's, I don't know what the situation is, but I accept every time I walk out the door that I might not come back.
Hell,
And to me, it's peace of mind because I'm accept okay, like I get that that is the way it is. So let me at least take in whatever I can in those moments. I know that's harsh for some people, but I imagine to some degree that that's a little bit of a combination of abusive alcoholic father growing up and then 16 plus years of literally fighting my ass off,
well,
against different variables.
so what you're doing, and that's the same thing that I believe, right? Is like, hey, listen, like the more shitty things I see and the more stuff I get exposed to on the job, actually the more caring it makes me to my kids. The
Mhm.
more that I can see both sides of the coin. Like there has to be opposites. The universe, the world,
I
like
know.
good and evil, like it balances. I promise it does, right? So like the worse I see, I know there's the other end of the spectrum. So I feel
Mm.
good about it in a sense, right? But what you're doing and like just looking at you and knowing you and hearing what you just said, like you've taken what you can control, which is you, and acknowledged there ain't shit else I can do about anything else. Like I can walk across the street, get smashed by a bus. Like, hey,
100%.
didn't plan on it, right? But it could happen. It's totally possible. It happens every day to people, right?
Yeah.
And you accept that. That's part of life is you could die, right? But you're also taking what you can control is you, and you're
Yeah.
learning and growing and doing as much as you can. And everything you see that you touch goes into training and getting better and making yourself like having more control over the outside variables,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And you're doing it
Yeah.
without freaking out and like walking around like a tactical crazy person, like gun on your hip and ever wait, don't move. Here, like show me your hands, like that kind of stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And with that comes some pretty big blind spots. I always tell people, like, if you want to kill me, do it at the gym. Because I probably have my guard is so low when I'm at the fucking gym. Like I'm out in public and it's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of eyeing everybody down. Like this is my version of eye contact in a conversation in public. It's like,
Yep.
like the whole, but I'm not paranoid. I'm just like, all right, like what the fuck's going on over there? But man, at the gym, oh my God, I'm not paying attention to shit, right?
Yeah.
But it's true. It's interesting. And I understand how, that same mindset, like people can go deep the opposite direction. Like to your point, there's opposites in all of this, right? There's always dichotomies that go on both sides of it. So you could be completely aloof and that's not good. And you could be completely paranoid and that's not good. It's like you need to find this middle ground that's like, look, man, life's not fair. Shit happens. But to your point, it's like, what are you in control of? Well, you're in control of every action and decision that you take inside of 24 hours every single day. That includes when you go to sleep, how you set yourself up, and then whatever stresses or variables the world puts on you. It's like at the end of the day, how do I better prepare myself for those things? And it's to me, I don't know, man. That like to me, that's like, oh, look how cool that is. If there's something that, go back to what we were talking about, like the difficulties from a business standpoint. If I looked at, kind of a lot of this stuff creeping up and I go, oh man, these people did this and that, and and blame it on everybody else. Well, I'm essentially saying that I have no control over my business, and that's the most ass backwards way to look at it. Instead, like when things started coming up, and it was like, man, there's some things going on that aren't going well. What am I missing? What can I do better? What slipped through the cracks? Where all right, let's highlight like what are we doing well, what are we not doing well, and then how do we turn that and build the skills whatever we have to do, and it's and I made a couple of mistakes even in that process. Was like, oh, I think it's this, and you start doing that and you're like, ooh, wasn't that? And okay, well, but it's that ownership of going, well, I got us here. I'm the one that's in control. It's I'm the majority shareholder of the business, and it's like, okay, that allows me to go, well, if I got us here, I can get us out. But if I sit there and look at it as like, oh man, the economy happened and COVID wrecked my gym and all this type shit, it's like, well, I mean, kinda, but those are just circumstances. Like, so what are you going to do about it? You can make a choice to shut the gym down. You can make a choice to renovate the gym. You can make a choice to change your business model. You can make a choice to market more, whatever that is. But whatever it is, it's your choice at the end of the day. And, if you let that and release that and go, oh, that shit's never going to happen to me or that, and then it happens, you've just rescinded any type of control over anything. That's like at the end of the day, you're in control of every single one of your actions and whatever's going on. And that includes the choice to not make a choice. But still at the end of the day, it's yours. And the more you can own that, it's not always easy, and that's the other thing too. I feel like I had these conversations a lot the last few weeks. It's like, oh yeah, but that's so hard. It's like, well, yeah, no shit. Like, yeah, yeah. What point in time is everything supposed to just kind of like fall into your lap? Like, holy crap, man. Like I've had like owning a business for 11 years has been like this. It's,
Ooh,
and
man.
it's like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's like,
talk about stress, dude. Like that
oh
is,
yeah,
oh my God, especially at gym. Like, I mean,
yeah,
you mentioned some stuff like 2020 COVID happened and was like, hey, what am I going to do from here? Well, I was in the same boat as you, like over in Indiana, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it again.
yeah,
I'm not willing to quit my job and basically like restart in certain ways. I said
yep,
I cannot do it, so I sold it. And
yep,
it worked out okay. And on the back end of that, it's like, did I do the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? Like, I don't know, man. Like it would have taken me in different paths had I done different things, but that's not where I was. So it's like,
100%.
yeah, yeah,
We were ready. We had it mapped out, my business partner and I, like we had talked, like, all right, like, what are the plans? I was always, I got this idea from an old Tim Ferriss article. But it was, he talked about like writing your eulogy, like sit down, write your eulogy and like go back and kind of like, what did you get out of your life? And, put yourself in a place where you're dead. Like, and you're kind of getting into that. And then from there, in the same kind of conversation, he brings up all these different ways to start approaching it. But anyway, where I'm going with this as I'm rambling is I've always enjoyed when you get like a real fucked up situation, like, oh my God, what would I do if? And like people will ask themselves that rhetorically. I don't know what I would do if, if whatever, whatever, whatever. It's like, well, sit down and answer the question. Like, don't just let that question ring in your head. Like, oh, I have no idea what I would do, if somebody, shot my kid. It's like, well, that's a fucked up thought to have, but you're going to be more prepared for that situation. If that's a troubling question for you, then sit the fuck down and answer it. What would you do? What are the plans you would need to put in place to make that happen? Well, when COVID hit and, the gym spiraled out, like that's my full-time gig. Like the gym, that is what feeds my family. That's what keeps a shelter over our head. So like to me, that's a big problem. Like this is everything in my life is centered around, especially at the time, my wife hadn't gone back to work yet. She was staying home with the kids. It's like if this business collapses, that's our source of income. So one source of income for this house. It's what's doing everything for us. And that thought came back to my head was like, I'm sitting there going like, fuck, what am I going to do if we can't bounce back from this? And I remember thinking back to that trail and the Tim Ferriss conversation that I read through and being like, oh, that's a troubling question. Like, let's sit down and answer it. So I literally sat down and I mapped out a bunch of plans. The first thing I said was, like, okay, if the business doesn't bounce back, well, I should probably do an updated inventory on all of the assets. And so, literally, like, you want to talk about the best thing I did during COVID from a business owner standpoint? I went in and we did a full inventory of everything that we owned inside of the building,
yeah,
and we even added in depreciation and what things were going for, and especially with the craze of everybody buying fitness equipment for their houses, it was like gangbuster at the time. And I remember sitting back and just being like, oh, like if we sold everything here and I took my percentage of it of what I own in the business, like that's like 4 years of my annual salary. And I
yeah,
literally was just like, everything after that was like, all right, cool, but I like what I do. I love what I do. I love our community. So I'm gonna make this work. I'm gonna figure it out. But it was like always in the back of my head was like, oh, like I sat down, I was like, fuck, what am I gonna do? And then it was like, oh, I could sell off all of the equipment and technically have 4 years of salary stockpiled over off to the side.
yep.
Oh fuck. And then I got 4 years to figure out what to do from there. And I could just travel around and teach seminars. It was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, all right, like this is great. And but it brought down all of the stress, like in the meetings we would have, like there was a small group of us that were still running classes digitally for there. And we had leased out all of our equipment to our members and stuff. And so we would have these weekly meetings. And the first couple were like, well, God, what are we gonna do? And then I like sat down and I did that. And it was like the next meeting was like, all right, guys. So like I'm thinking maybe this is a good idea. I don't know, let's try that. It was just so relieving because I had a plan. And we
Yeah.
actually had a couple of different business models based off of that. We essentially had like plan A, B, C, D, E, and F. And we obviously wanted to execute on plan A. We love our facility, we love our community. We wanted to keep that going. And we did. And any good business owner that's been around, I learned this the hard way with the first kind of business model that we were running. But very quickly, I learned like you should have anywhere from 2 to 3 months of your overhead expenses in a savings at all times. And I remember, you know, that hit, and it was like 2 months. Like we were shut down for about 2 months, and I was like, holy shit, like this is great. I actually eventually started listening and built a savings for the business, and it was like we were able to survive these things. And, going back to just where this whole thing started, it's like those were all decisions, and it's like you face whatever the problem is, you assess it, and one of those decisions was selling the business, and I would have been fine. It would have sucked. I wouldn't have felt great because I'm going to miss the people and seeing them, 5, 6 days a week when I'm in there, and I really do. Like I freaking love that building. Um, but we would have been okay. Like if you look at like core principles and beliefs, like what's the primary thing I need to take care of? Well, I need to take care of my wife and my 2 kids. Like that's nothing else matters. Well, if I got that shit knocked out of the park, it's like, okay, like, hey, if all of our efforts fail, this is the safety net. And that safety net in that case was a pretty good fucking safety net. And I have other skill sets. And if I already started going into like, maybe I'll go back to bartending. I don't know. That shit was fun. Like, I'll figure out a way to do it, Like,
Yeah.
God,
So
I could be a
yeah,
firefighter.
yeah. Well, hey, and I think anybody can be a firefighter. So I mean, that's like, can you
I
take
figured,
naps? Can you take naps and eat cheese? Like you'll be all right. Um, but no, what you're discussing is the ability to be flexible and to again like view the stress in a different light, right? So you're taking it and you're like, no, where a door closes, three more open. I just have to be aware of what those things are, because sometimes the door will open right in front of your face, but you're so tied to the inflexible like static role that you had, and it's like, hey man, that's not there anymore. Like the
yeah,
building is gone,
yep,
and if you don't see that, if you're not open to it, then you're gonna be miserable because you won't be able to
yeah,
transition to the next chapter. And it's always
yeah.
sad, man. Like it's always sad. Like I remember when I moved out of my old house, my first house, right? Like, you shut the door on that. It's like your first house. It's like a sitcom,
Mm,
and it's like, man, this is kind of sad. Like I'm leaving this chapter, but you're going into something new. So it's like
yeah.
you just have to appreciate what was and then move into what is possible. And
Amen.
that's really like, embracing that hero's journey too, like and
Yeah.
understanding that like this is a constant evolution of who we are,
Mm,
and it happens to everybody,
yeah. 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 Bloody hell, man. God, this conversation was deep, bro.
That's how I roll.
Yeah. I
Hey,
love it.
so transitioning into something a little bit more shallow, right?
Sure.
So with
Let's
your
bring it back to down
with,
to earth. We lost some listeners on that one.
so well, good news is since I started this back up, I probably have like 3 downloads, so whatever.
There you go. See? There you go.
But all right, so with Endeavor, like you're
Mhm.
still running like functional fitness or CrossFit, or are you still an affiliate technically?
We're hopefully no one from CrossFit HQ watches or listens to this episode.
I think you're
Uh,
safe. I think you're safe.
but, but my fellow affiliate owners that are going to hear this part, we are affiliated until they kick me off, which is going to happen very soon. So we still currently are technically affiliated, but I'm the affiliate owner, and my certification is like I don't know, lapsed by like two
Oh yeah,
years. And
yeah.
they
Okay,
yeah,
I'm
they keep
tracking.
they yeah, well that and they're cracking the rates up incredibly high because you got to remember like I opened the CrossFit affiliate in 2008. So my annual fees have been $1,000,
Yeah.
and they have been since 2008. Well, then they just released that they're bumping those up from 1,000 to 3,500 next year, and then the following year it'll be 5,000. They're bringing
Why?
everybody, no matter what. The old, you will be grandfathered in for life. The new rule is that's no longer it. So they're bumping everybody that's below 3,500. They're bumping them up to 3,500 for 1 year. And then the very following year, they're bumping everybody to 5,000.
Are they are they
And
are they trying to like downsize their affiliates? Do they want people to quit?
No, and again, I'm admittedly like this is completely biased and to be honest, ignorant because I haven't really tracked much of what CrossFit's doing. If I'm going to be completely honest, um, CrossFit was an amazing resource and jump and start for me, and I still think it's a great program in the right hands. But after 16 years, not even 16 years, but 10 years, we kind of learned everything they had to offer, if not past that. I mean, we went well beyond CrossFit. We were getting certifications through USAW and from powerlifting organizations and kettlebells and gymnastics,
Yeah,
like people
yeah.
that do it professionally,
Mhm.
and we're getting business mentorship from different, developments, things like that. So there wasn't a lot necessarily for CrossFit to offer from a growth standpoint that we hadn't seen. So honestly, like the last, I don't know, 7 years for me at least, we were paying $1,000 a month for marketing just to be able to say we did CrossFit because people were looking for CrossFit, but we have our own beliefs on how people should be taught to move properly. What should you be teaching them about bracing and loading and physiologically how their body is supposed to function? And, what is good programming? And, I think, CrossFit is an absolutely incredible program. It's an amazing gateway drug. And then at a certain point, it's, how is this affiliation serving me and my community? And there's some fun things that CrossFit does, but again, you've been around long enough and there's not much I'm going to learn from that educationally. So the spin from my understanding, and I will make this disclaimer that it's completely biased and I don't have the right to say this because I haven't researched enough. So I'm making a lot of assumptions based off the very little bit of research.
I love
But
it.
the way they're spinning it is they're going to put more into the education and business development side of things. Okay, so all right, whatever. But I've been in business, I've been running this for 16 years, and I currently have a business from 11 years, and I've read everything in their business manuals. I've read through their, I've that shit I have read. And I've been through CFL 1 and CFL 2 multiple times at this point because you've had to
Right.
recertify every 5 years.
Yep.
And then I kept up on the education side of things. And I, there's nothing I'm going to get from them that I either haven't already found or could find, in my opinion and in my experience, done better technically for cheaper. So like for $4,000 a year, I mean, I could sign two of my coaches up for business development classes where they're going to get one-on-one mentorship, for $1,000 a piece. And then on top of that, I could send, whatever, maybe let's say 5 or 6 of my coaches off to different certifications. And those certifications are going to be certifications that we have decided upon are going to make a better impact on our community for the same exact price that you're going to charge me, to go up. So I mean, maybe that's what they're doing and maybe it's good. I think 16 years ago, I probably would have loved that because I didn't have that education back then. But you've been around long enough and it's like, all right. Um, why I really think they're doing it is they went public and they have shareholders now and they have to make
Uh,
money.
okay.
It's no longer just run by a CEO and it's no longer just run by, Glassman, whether you think he's crazy or not. Back in the day, he might have been nutty, but it was I never felt like they previously before they went public, I never felt like they were out to get money. Like, yeah, they charged ridiculous prices for courses and stuff, but they were always optional. You didn't have to re-up and you didn't have to do this and you didn't have to do that and all that type of shit. You didn't have to pay, all the time. You didn't have to pay 10 fucking dollars just to take a judge's course. It's the same exact judge's course you took last time, even though you're a certified CFL 2 trainer or whatever the hell it is. But
Yeah.
it's just like, man, it really feels like. Now I will say they've done some very good things. I know like Dale King and Andrew Charlesworth they were our regional representatives, and that was really cool. They've been doing a lot of town hall meetings and doing some affiliate summits, so they're doing a lot of really good stuff too. So I don't want to completely dog on them, but me personally, and again, it's completely unbiased, and I don't have a right to say it, but I'm going to say it because it's what I'm living. I feel like for the most part, since they've had all the CEO switches and they went public, you can just tell that a lot of moves are being made to make the shareholders happy, and it's going to be at the risk of some people. I don't think it's everybody. Because I mean, you got to remember, $1,000 is cheap, man. I mean, even before that, people were paying 3 grand. So for
Right.
them, it's not even double. For me, it's 5 times. Like you're literally increasing my affiliation fee 5 times, and I
Yeah.
don't feel like I'm getting anything in return. So anyway, where I'm going with that is I don't plan on recertifying, and I don't plan on re-upping. So technically, I have until the end of August until my affiliation is up for the year,
Yeah.
or they send me another email that finally says, because I'm already on probationary status because I haven't re-upped my certification. So, but they keep taking my monthly payment. So I just kind of keep letting it ride, and we're still on the calendar. And one day they're going to kick me off, and I'm
Yeah.
not going to lose any sweat over it. I'll just go on the
Yeah.
website and change all the things on the website. So, but yes, so back to Endeavor. We teach strength conditioning, is where I'm going nowadays. Like, so we teach overall fitness, wellness, and strength conditioning.
So with that, I will say, like as a prior, former CrossFit affiliate owner, I agree with everything you said. Like it was such a good program for me when it started. Towards the end of it, right before I sold it, like it ended up being where it was like I think I'm outgrowing this a little bit. Like I don't have a need for the branding anymore, and that's the way I think it was supposed to be. You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
they really wanted to do that, like then they need to provide you with more structure to so that you don't outgrow them. Just like your
Yeah.
members at your gym. Like you have to keep growing with your members or they're going to outgrow you, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I will say, and this is, I don't know your exact situation, but I will say too that, going back to what we're in control of, like I'm not putting a ton of effort in either. You know what I mean? So like I'm not going out of my way to engage in probably some of the things that I should and I would probably get good benefit out of. Um, so it's a two-way street there as well, but I also am not in a position where I feel like I need to. And so I've made that choice and that's the decision. And if that brings our relationship to an end, well, shit, man, they got me for 16 years and it
yeah.
treated me very well for 16 years. And you won't hear me talk poorly about the program and the ideology the way it's supposed to be. But you might hear me talk poorly about some of the coaches and owners and business dealings out
100%. All
there,
right. So we got like 6 minutes left.
All
So
right,
being,
rapid fire.
yeah, being a like strength conditioning, jujitsu, I don't know if you still consider yourself Krav Maga or self-defense
Hey,
or
I
what.
got two black belts in Krav Maga, bro.
Sweet. Wasn't sure what terminology you're using.
Yeah,
So, like, how do you balance your training schedule? Because that
yeah,
that's a big thing. Like talking to dudes at jits, and even for myself, like the more I get into jujitsu, the more I have to like limit the other end of the spectrum, where I end
yeah,
up like, dude, I'm 42, like I'm kind of hurting myself. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
how do you balance training volume?
Yeah, so goals, I think, is the biggest thing right out of the gate. Like, you got to know what you want. Right now, personally, this has nothing to do with my career. It has nothing to do with the business, whatever that is. Personally, I am looking to accomplish a black belt in jiu-jitsu and actually feel like I deserve it, right? So that's where a majority of my focus is centered around that personal goal of mine. I would say, I don't know, maybe I'm 2 years out from it. I don't know. I don't know how that, I mean, I know how it works, but I don't know how it works. It really comes down to Dion, the guy that we're underneath. But so that's how I'm going to dictate when I'm making decisions on training volume and where I'm focusing my training volume. It's in that space because as a personal accomplishment, that is something that I would like to accomplish. Um, so if I have to make a decision between, let's say, 5 sessions on the mats and only lifting twice a week, I'll make that decision. That's fine as long as that's what body volume can handle. So that's where I'm going to gain most of my stuff. And then the other training, I have to make sure, just because I coach it, I have to make sure I'm touching it. So I try to get a little bit of kickboxing in, once a week, maybe once every other week. At least make sure I'm hitting a heavy bag once a week. I absolutely, we both know this, but strength and health and wellness and fitness and mobility is everything. You can't do the cool shit if you're not able to move. So I make sure I'm at least lifting twice a week. I generally get 3 sessions in a week. So I would say 3 days a week, I have a lifting session and I'm on the mats. So I'll usually roll during those sessions. And then there's 1 or 2 other days. So like a total of 5 training days that are just primarily fight focused. But for me, a lot of my focus is going to be on jiu-jitsu until I get that black belt. And then when I get that black belt, I'm going to I shift. And I've done that my whole 16-year career now in fighting is like focus heavily on Krav Maga. And then once I feel like I've gotten some good progress there, I take most of my attention somewhere else. Maybe it's wrestling, and then I go take my attention to shooting and then go here. But instead of trying to do everything, and it never works that way, it's like I've got to have it's periodization is all it is, right? It's like you do a phase, you do 6 cycles of shooting, and then you move on to 6 cycles of grappling, and then you move on to 6 cycles of this based off what my needs are. And right now, BJJ is the last place where I feel like a student. Everywhere else, I always feel like I'm the coach. And jiu-jitsu to me, even though I coach 2 classes a week, I still see myself as a student there. Like, and I feel like a student there. So for me, it's very rewarding to not be the highest ranking guy. Mike blows me out of the water. He's knows 5 times what I know when it comes to grappling, and I personally really enjoy that. I miss that element of being a student. So that fuels a lot of my drive to be on the mats in jiu-jitsu right now.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think the same thing. I talk to people about that all the time. Like, where should I, how should I do? I want to get stronger, but I don't want to give up any time on the mat. And it's like, well, how much time are you doing on the mat? And they're like 7 days a week. I'm like, well, you have to
Oh
give up
yeah.
some of that in order to
Yeah.
get some of this. You know what I mean? Like, you have to.
Take a nap. Like seven's too
Well, I
much.
mean, well, like you have to, like, bottom line is like you have this much volume, right?
Yeah,
You can only cram so, like, you're trying to cram 10 pounds of shit into a 5 pound bag. Like, you
yep.
just can't do it. You have to
No.
modulate your volume accordingly.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do sometimes. Like for me, I know I really like to lift a certain way, but
Yep.
my volume has to change based on my age alone. Like, I can't
Hmm.
do it the same way. I guess what? I can't front squat at all because I got arthritis in my elbows so bad. You know what I mean? Like, I can't do it the same way. I have to adjust my goals. I have to change things for who I am, right? And what I want to do and where I want to get to.
Well, and
And
that's fun because like you and I have known each other since the like,
yeah,
hey, let's just abuse the shit out of our bodies through like everything days. And now same exact boat. I'm like there was a workout the other day that had like 135-pound barbell cleans, and I was like, I might do kettlebell cleans. Like,
hell
like
yeah.
kettlebell feels a lot better today. It's like I'll
Yes.
do a 100-pound kettlebell. That's
Right.
gonna feel better for me.
Dude, you're an
So
impression. All right, we have like 90 seconds, so
yes.
hit me with where people can find you, man.
Sure. You'll find most of my antics on Instagram. You can find at Giannetti Aaron, so Jannetti, two N's, two T's, and then Aaron, Aaron. Or you can find us at Knife Control Concepts. That's where you'll find the majority of my stuff, and then that'll trace you off to Facebook and all the other type things.
Dude, that thank you so much. It was awesome. Love catching up with you. And
Hell yeah, man! It's been too
yeah,
long.
so I'm gonna talk to our jiu-jitsu guys and see if we can organize a training session of some kind.
Oh, dude. Hell
So,
yeah, it's easy for me to get
so
out there. It's like 3 hours. I can get there easy.
hell yeah, dude. Yeah, you need anything, you know where to find me. And yeah. All right, man.
You got it, man. Take it easy. It was good talking, buddy.
You too, man.
Later.